Hello developers, welcome to my new video. In this video we will learn about supplier interfaces and consumer interfaces. So let's talk about supplier interfaces first. So supplier is an interface that does not take any argument, but it produces a value when the get function is invoked. Suppliers are useful when we don't need to supply any value and obtain a result at the same time. So in the supplier interfaces, there are many different types of supplier interfaces provided by Java 8 library. So some of them are given below. In this interface, T actually representing a generic type T, and it has an abstract method get, and T means that it will be returning a type, any object reference data type which we would be using with this supplier interface. And we also have double supplier, and it will be returning a double value when we invoke the function get as double, and int supplier will produce a value int when we invoke the function get as int, and same here, get as long will produce a value of a long data type, and similar case a boolean one. So let's see the examples that how we would implement these interfaces. I have already created a supplier demo class and the person class. This class has a name and age, and this constructor is provided so we can easily create a person object with two arguments. First one is name and second one with the age. So let me go you through the example. So I created a supplier interface. This is a function which is actually producing person object. It is outputting this person object whenever this function is getting invoked. So that function which we have written down is actually referencing to a supplier interface. So we can write the syntax like this, as you have seen in the previous example of a predicate as well. So suppose we have a function is person eligible for driving, and we wanted to see that if a particular person object is eligible for driving or not. So in that case we actually create a predicate as well, and we see that is a person eligible for driving or not by creating our respective variables and function. So I created a function is person eligible for driving. So in this function we have two arguments. First one is supplier. We are passing a supplier and also a predicate. So you can see that we have called the method predicate.test method. And in this method we are actually passing a supplier object, and supplier.get method is invoked. So how is this function is getting performed? First of all, supplier.get function will be called. This one, it will be actually provide us the new person object. It will create a person object and will return it. So this function will be invoked first, and after getting this function which will be invoked, we will get a person. So after getting that, predicate.test method will be called. This method p.age greater than 18. So then this method will be invoked because this method will already get person p, and this person p will be actually supplied by our supplier interface object which we have created already. So let me show you the result, that is it working or not. So let me run the code. So you can see eligible for driving and it returns true. So similar way we can use the int supplier. In this example, we have created an int supplier interface, and we are casting it into the integer because method random function is actually returning a double value. So we are casting it down to the integer value, and when we run it, it should run successfully. So you can see 3. So each case the value will be different, of course, because it's the random value which is produced. So similar way we can use a double supplier method instead of an int supplier. So let me modify my code. So it is producing a double value. Let me run again. So it's a random value which will be actually, so it's a random value which will be actually a double value in this case. So the similar way you can create a double supplier and long supplier, and the other supplier interfaces you can have a look over it and you can try it by your own self. So let me go you through the consumer interface. So the consumer interface, as the name indicates, that it will be consuming a value, but it will not produce anything. It will not return anything. So in case of a consumer interface, in this category, we have many different functional interfaces provided by Java 8. And some of them are consumer T. It will be a generic one, like you have seen the example of a predicate and supplier interface. that this T will be actually a generic data type and it will not return anything. These are all void methods. It will actually accept the T, which actually denotes a reference variable, and it can be any type. So in case of a double consumer, it will actually accept a double value, but the function name would be the same. You can use a same function name in case of a double consumer interface, and similar way with the int consumer, long consumer, and there is also a by consumer as well. In this consumer, we are actually getting a two input argument. First one is T, which is actually denoting a generic type, and other one is also a generic type. So by consumer can take any value. Let me go you through the examples for this one. So consumer can be used in all those contexts where an object needs to be consumed, like taken as an input and perform some function on the object without returning any result. For the consumer interface, I have already created a class consumer demo, and in this class we will actually create some examples. So you can see it, string consumer.accept function is invoked, hello world, and this is actually just a printing out value to show off the result. Let me run the code. So I created another consumer interface which is printing out the integer value, the value we have already passed into our functional interface. So you can see it, I passed a value 5 and I invoke this function int consumer.accept, so it will print out integer values 5 in this case. Let me run the code. So it is returning an integer values 5, and it's an example of a int consumer, but the difference is that we have just passed a value which will be an integer. So if you go to the class of a consumer, you can see that it has another method, that's a and then method. It has two methods. First one is accept, we have already seen, because it's a single abstract method which is available, and it is also having a default method, and then method. So this method is a very useful for the method chaining. So let me show you the example in that case, and you can see that it is returning a composed consumer and performing the operation followed by the after operation. So I first create a consumer string. So suppose we have two consumer interfaces and we wanted to combine them using a and then method. So we can chain them. So you can see I have chained the consumer 1 with the consumer 2 using a method and then I am invoking a method accept with the hello argument which I have already passed. So in this case, please remember that we have a same argument which is actually passed to both of these consumers. So that's a hello, and let me run the code. So you can see from the input that the same argument hello is called, like hello my name is person 1 and hello I am from Sweden. So actually it combines, you can say that it actually chaining the method interfaces in this case, and we can add a more consumer interfaces if we wanted to have. But please remember that in this case our argument should have a similar value. We can't pass a multiple argument values for one interface and then the other one. So in this case you will have to invoke it and then you can concatenate it. So let me create another class for by consumer demo. Let me create a by consumer interface. So I created an example of a by consumer interface. This interface is accepting two arguments which can be any data type. Because of those two arguments, we are also having a function accept method. This function accept method is also accepting two arguments. So whenever we invoke this function, we'll actually output these values. So whenever we invoke greet.accept function, this above function will be executed. So it's taking two arguments. Let me run the code. So it is showing my country, which is correct. So in this way we have seen that how consumer and supplier interfaces are working and how we can create them. Though these are very simple examples to make you understand, and see you in the next video.